All right, let's get started, guys. Okay, so a couple things. How many of you guys are planning on creating all your materials in Substance Designer from scratch again? Maybe. This is not a trick question. This is not a trick question. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just find a few materials on here. We're going to go through the whole process of downloading them, opening them up in Designer, checking to make sure that it's the correct resolution. We'll go over parameters, and then we will go over the export process as well. And then we will go into Maya and talk about applying those materials in Maya to be used in Unreal. And we will go over vertex painting. If we run out of time, we will carry vertex painting over into Saturday's lecture, okay? But I would really like to save Saturday for critiques. So we will try to get through it. I do not want to rush through it either, though. So if we run out of time, we will carry vertex painting over into Saturday, all right? Cool. So I'm just going to grab a couple materials off of here. Nice, obviously I've searched for brick before. But we're just going to find some basic material. So we'll do, I don't really want a stylized brick. This one's probably a good one. So let's just go with this one. Oh, it's got a nice set of parameters that I can work with, too. So we'll download that one. Yep, we'll log in first. And I already have a plaster, but let's just, it doesn't hurt to go through this a couple times. No, we'll just use my plaster for this. And let's find, let's grab some wood. I want to just go with a solid wood for this. No, I don't care about those. Actually, I've got a concrete that we can use. So we'll work with these to start off with. And I needed to. So here, again, dragging things onto my desktop. Okay, so we'll start off with the start with brick wall. You guys may find that you're only given a .sbsar that can be used inside of bitmap to material, and I believe it also lets you use this in Painter. But I also do want to go over the export process as well for Painter. And you'll see me over here making little notes on the side, so apologize. Oops. Okay, this is an outdated material. If I ever see this, this means that there's some broken references. So if you guys get materials that have those broken references, and this is a little bit more stylized than what I want to, but we'll roll with it. So whenever you guys get a material from Substance Share, Substance Source, all that good stuff, I really want you to make sure you're taking care to look at the resolution. By default, they're usually 256 by 256. It's going to be way too small for your environment, right? So make sure you come over here to the base parameters of that material and you increase that size. Do not go above 2048, and I would not recommend going below 512. Again, depending on the scale of the material that you need. If you're using a bunch of tiling materials, you probably want to stay around 1024, 2048, okay? So between those. Since I know I'm going to be using a lot of brick, I'm probably, let's just test it out at 1024. What's really nice is if I need a higher resolution for this, I can just come back to Designer, increase that resolution, and I don't want it to be 2048, let's do 1024. I'm not a huge fan of this, now that I'm looking at this, but we'll roll with it. So parameters, let's see if we can get these parameters to work. And then I'll show you guys how to make those parameters. Fit this into the screen a little bit better. So let's go to preview really quickly. And I showed you guys last time that Tudor wall, right, and how editable it was. It took a while to open, but some of the parameters that you guys may want to expose, and this really goes for your personal ones, but if you get ones off Substance Share, you can certainly, if they come to this level of detail, you can certainly go in and expose your own parameters if there aren't any exposed, right? Especially since it's not your own graph, you may not want to constantly be trying to search where that tiling section is in the graph. So do it once, expose those parameters, and you don't have to do it again. So tiling, you know, is, let's see how quickly it'll do it. It's actually doing it pretty quick. So this is just controlling the overall tiling. It looks like it's affecting the actual base color of it. And I would rather, when it comes to exposing parameters, I'd rather show you guys one of my own instead. So I'm going to do that. Yeah, let's do the concrete tiles. I wanted that one anyway. And I'm going to change the size because I don't need it to be quite that large. And let me pick out a height output for this. So you guys don't remember how to make outputs, so get a refresher on that. So down, label, height. There's our height. I probably, when it comes to heights, I almost always add in a levels. So this is a good one to kind of play around with. Not roughness though. Do the same thing with roughness typically as well. And put this back just a little bit. Yeah, that's a really bad roughness. Anyway, so I'm going to just kind of play around with these values a little bit more. I typically, when it comes to levels, I like to find where these clamps are and make my adjustments to my height here with only the gray value. Now, let's do a stick on range. So a range is probably what I would use to actually make my parameters out of, rather than using the levels. As you guys can see, I don't have anything here that I can expose. So I like to, again, kind of get that clamped value. And I come over here and to expose parameters. So again, if I'm wanting to mess around with these range values, usually I start with the base color or the tiling first. So let's do that. Well, let's do the tiling first. Oh, this is a fun one. Not my blends. Shape. Tile random. So let's see. If I adjust this, does it affect everything overall? It does. Perfect. All right. So that's the one that I wanted. All right. Also, let's over here. So when you're ready to expose some parameters, so again, for example, I want to expose specific tiling amounts. You'll click these little splines here, and you'll hit expose. Now, I never leave this at default. I always give it a different name because, again, this is something that I'm going to be exposing my other tile random that affects the base color. So I don't want to name it, tile X amount, because I know that I'm going to have another tile X amount later down the road. And what it's going to do, it's going to overwrite that first one. So you almost always want to give it its own unique name. So you'll hit this little drop-down arrow, go to new. And so I'm going to call this tile amount X, because it's my most basic amount, so it is going to affect my overall tiling. And the other ones that I'm going to do is tile color. We'll make that decision in a moment. I think I'm going to do tile like color X amount. Is that okay? And then I also want a Y, so I'm going to expose. For this, I can always change this later. Amount Y. Now, once I've changed that, notice that I can't change that here. If I want to change it again, I'll need to go back to my base material. And if I scroll down here, I now have those input parameters where I can adjust that amount X and Y. Now, I want to change the label of this and give it some grouping. So in the input parameters, again, you may be tempted to just leave it like this. I wouldn't recommend it. I would give it very specific naming conventions. So again, the label amount here is X amount. So I'm going to, again, name it tile amount X. For the grouping, I'm going to just call this base tiling. And I'm going to copy this because I want the other one to also be base tiling. For the group, so group, base tiling, and I'm going to change this to tile amount Y. So now when I come over here to preview, we have this base tiling group. We have a tile amount X and a tile amount Y. Now when I'm ready to affect my tile amount color, I'm going to create a whole new group that's going to be color. So it's going to affect my tiling color, like what's masked out, and what my colors are, which I believe I started doing here. Yep. So with this, if we look over here, and we can't see it anymore because I exposed it. So if we come back to my parameters, and we look at that base amount, they're both set to 4. So really, what I want to do, the reason why I want to keep the tiling amount here, you want those tiling amounts to match with your base. So again, because of the way that I built this, I have to expose these amounts as well. So if I change the tiling for my base tile, I need to go back and I know that I need to change my tiling amount to match my base tile. And so I'm going to show you guys to put in a little note for anybody, whether it's yourself or it's somebody else using your material. So again, I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to do expose and do new. This is for X. So for color variation tile X, and let me copy this. So hit OK there. And actually, this is because of a mask. So I need to actually change the title for this. So let me clear that. So if you ever want to reset it, that's the other thing that you can do. After you've hit expose, I'm just going to hit OK real quick. If you're like, no, I want to go back, I did something wrong, you can come back to edit and you can hit clear. And now you're back to where you can edit that amount again. So I'm going to expose again. And this is, we'll give it a new name. So we will say for color variation mask is what we'll call it. Tile X. I should have copied that. That's a lot of words. Okay. So I'm going to hit OK. And then for the Y, I'm going to expose color variation mask 1 tile Y. Again, this is just so you know what it is, right? You want the naming convention to make sense to what it is. And this is to make your life easier. So there's going to be a little bit of typing, but again, at the end of the day, after you're done with this, you don't have to mess with it anymore. You can open up your material, mess around with those parameters when you want to make those adjustments, not have to go into the graph and make those changes. So I can change the name of this later. Let's see. Tile mask 1 Y. And let me go ahead and copy this so I don't have to type all that again. So I'm going to hit OK. So keep those exposed. And let me do the same for this mask 2. I knew I got it mixed up. So it's mask 1 tile. Okay. I'll fix that later. So X, Y, okay. And then I'll worry about the grouping here in a moment. Since I know my color is here, I almost always, at the end of this, like to add in a hue saturation. So I'll put this in here in HSL, and I'll expose all of these parameters. And what this is going to do, it's going to allow me, again, just a little bit of control over that grunge. If you're wanting to focus in on a more individual level, we can come back here, do an HSL on these 2 different masks. But I think you guys are kind of getting the hang of how to expose parameters, right, on all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and just do an HSL for this. Expose this. Now we're going to go with color variation, or just color. We'll just call it color. Saturation. I'm going to color saturation. And we'll do color luminosity. And we'll hit OK. So again, I'm going to go over grouping with you guys again one more time. So if I scroll down here, now I've got a lot more parameters to work with. So we will go, we've got our base tiling, Y, and I have it in group here. I did not group the other one. Okay, so let's group the other one. So I'm going to group this base tiling, tile, mount X, group, base tiling. So those should be in the same group. And for this one, we want to label this color variation tile X. I think this one was the mask one. There we go, that was this one. All right, so again, for this one, I'm going to label it color for this group. So again, it's going to affect the color. And make a note for myself, if I change the base tiling, make sure color tiling matches value. So again, this is so I know that if I need to change one, I need to change the other. So again, this is really a note for me so I remember that one affects the other. So one needs to be changed if the other's changed. So we've got color variation mask 1. Y, group, color. So you're going to notice I've got the group first, then the naming convention. And just 2 and 2, perfect. And I'm just copying and pasting. And I need to copy and paste this note as well. So this part's not overly exciting, guys, I'll be honest with you. It's not. It's not overly exciting, but it's going to save you a lot of headache in the future if you don't want to go back through and make those changes in the graph every single time. So it is meant to save you time. It takes some time right now, but in the future, it's meant to save you time. All right. Somebody wake him up, please. Miguel, you can sleep at home. All right. So again, just copying. I know it's not exciting. All right, so we're going to go to color again, make sure that it's grouped. And we're going to label this color, color variation, maybe. It sounds a little bit better. And with this, we can just change this independently. We don't have to worry about these other sections. We can just change them completely independent. And the group is color. So now we've got this larger group. If we look at this now, so we've got our, oh, fun, okay. It didn't stick. Yeah, okay, so for some reason it didn't stick. Oop. Color. I've typed color so many times it doesn't look like I'm spelling it right. Am I spelling it right? Yeah, I've typed it too many times now. Does that ever happen to you guys where you write something or, why is it not showing up over here? Okay, now it is. All right, so we've got our base tiling where we can adjust this to, let's just do something like 8 and 8. And notice we don't really, the other variation mask, as I mentioned before, you won't see it right away because it actually affects the color. So we want to go through and change this to 8 because we want to affect the actual color of the tiles, the different grunge. So now you can see how they're fitting into those a bit more. Does that make sense to you guys? And again, if I want to go in and change that color variation, because I don't have a whole lot of saturation on this, if I want to increase that saturation, I can. So again, you can get a lot of variation really quickly without going in and having to change the graph again. So this is just something I'm doing in the actual material. And this is very basic, right? This is a very, very basic parameters to work with. I want you guys starting off with basic parameters, okay? So for your multi-material, you may want to expose color variation. You may want to expose overall saturation of materials. You may want to go into that blend section and decide, how much of one material you want versus the other. Again, you don't have to do anything crazy, but I want you guys exposing at least 3 parameters per those single materials, okay? And the reason why, let me pull up a multi-material really quickly and show you. Give that a moment. So notice with this wood, it's got its own parameters. If you expose them on an individual level, when you're ready to come here and make your multi-material, why does it have to, come on. It's not wanting to go there. So we will go into the, all right. So if we want to change this, we will need to come in here, go to wood. And what's really nice is if I change these on an individual level, it affects your multi-material as well. So the changes that I make on this material on an individual level, it will affect your multi-material because we have them connected, that we have them linked. So let me change those wood planks. It's gonna make something a little crazy looking here, but so you guys can really see. So let's do something like this, where they're a little bit larger. I don't want more space, so this is super sensitive. Sorry. All right, let's go with something like that for now. So if I come over here to complete, let me look at our overall material. It's making a liar out of me. Sweet. That's why. Okay. So again, I've got those parameters exposed. I'm changing this amount. That's what I meant to say. So whenever you have your parameters exposed and you bring them in, you don't have to go back to your graph. You've got them still exposed here where you can make those adjustments. And again, I'm not a huge fan of the wood on this, but you kind of get what I'm saying with that. Let's see, with the wallpaper, same thing. Oops. No, that's not what I wanted to take me back. There we go. Those. And again, just like with this, we can randomize where the rips are located. And again, I'm just on this multi-material because we've exposed those parameters on that previous material. Does that make sense to you guys? Again, I know the setup is not exciting, but can you see how later on down the road, especially if you're building a whole substance library for yourself, how that's going to save you so much more time versus you having to go back into the material, make those edits, pick out the material, test it, go back to the material, make those edits, right? It's meant to save you time later on down the road. It may take a little bit of time initially, but down the road, you're going to be really glad that you exposed those parameters. There may be times where you come back to it and you're like, why did I expose those parameters? It makes no sense. It's going to happen, okay? So what I want you guys to do, like I said, with at least the base materials, even if they're materials that you did not build, find some parameters to expose. If they have already been exposed, find some different parameters to expose, okay? So I'm going to be looking at them. Again, I just want to make sure you guys know how to do this, all right? It doesn't have to be anything really fancy. It can be as simple as just changing the color value, right? It can be as simple as changing the tile amount, and so on, all right? Now, when you're ready, let me go ahead and bump this back up to a larger size. Let's do, oh, it's already 2048. Is it? It doesn't say. It's confused. All right. That doesn't look like 2048. Anyway, when you guys are ready to export out your materials as bitmaps or targets to be used for Maya, Unreal, whatever, you'll select the graph and you will do export outputs as bitmaps. Now, by default, it's set to TIFF. We work with Targa, so you want to change your format to Targa. The destination, that is entirely up to you. Notice by default, it wants to put it in a substances folder, right? For me, I have my own designer library where I put my materials in. If you guys have that, put it in there. If you want it to just be in the default substance folder, that's fine. I didn't mean to hit save. Explore. What did I just do? Let me restart this. I don't know what I just did. 1 second. Concrete tiles, broken. No, here we go. Okay. So export outputs as bitmaps. So again, Targa. I'm going to put this on the desktop really quickly. So desktop, new folder, and I'm just going to name this broken, so I'm going to name it damaged wall. And that's where I'm going to put this. Now, you may want to have your own individual folder based off of whatever substance you're doing. You may just want to have a folder where all of your targets go. I recommend making a folder for the specific material, though. Otherwise, you're just going to have a ton of targets to choose from. Notice that it's got this naming convention here. So it's going to start with the name that you have for your graph. So if you've named your graph derp1010 whatever, it's going to come out with your texture name as derp1010_AO or height, and so on, okay? So if you don't want it to be named derp101010, you'll come over here, you'll right-click, and you'll rename, okay? Go back to export as bitmaps. I'm good with all of these, actually. Height, roughness, normal, base color. Save all. And it's kicking out as a 512. I knew that size didn't look right. So again, find the size that you want. And I want it to be at least a 1024. So I'm going to overwrite this. So again, we go to export outputs as bitmaps. Make sure everything's good. Save all. Now if we go to the desktop, see where it pivots. Stop. Edit. Damaged wall. No. Just go back to design and see what happens. Because I named it broken wall, that's why. And I did not put it on the desktop. So again, this is when organization is super important. Let's see, it's gone to challenges, so I'm going to put it in this damaged wall folder. Open. So now it's set to that. So again, double check, make sure that your destination is where you want it, okay? See, I make mistakes too. All right, so now when we go to our desktop, and we go to that damaged wall, as you can see, I've got my AO, my base color, my height, my normal. Now, if you want it to have the correct naming convention that we use for Unreal, you're going to want to, let me go ahead and delete these really quickly. This will just save you the time from having to rename them later. So I'm going to rename this T underscore damaged wall. And now when I export this out, now everything is going to say T for texture and underscore damaged wall underscore AO and so on. Height, roughness, all that good stuff. And I didn't check to see if the location was correct. It was, okay. So again, let's double check, make sure that it's saved in that location, and it did. So I recommend putting a T underscore prefix before all of your exports. Again, this is just going to save you some time with naming conventions later. Let's see. All right, so now what I want to do is go over applying and assigning these materials to your meshes. So I'm going to open up Maya, and this is when you guys go back to UVing. But this is when hopefully UVing is kind of fun and not a nightmare to deal with. Next week, UVs will be a nightmare to deal with. Sorry, I'm just being honest. Come on. Actually, I don't want to work in 2017. I want to work in 2016. So I'm just going to open up the scene real quick. Not that fun. So I used to give you guys these meshes, and this used to be part of your competency. But now I make you do this process to your own meshes from week 1. Mostly because you guys don't care about these meshes. You don't care what they look like at the end of the day. If it's your environment, though, where it's all of your work, you're going to care just a little bit more, I'm assuming, right? Yeah, no? You guys are so tired. Miguel, shake it off. All right. So when it comes to applying multiple materials to single meshes, you guys have probably done this before on accident many times. How many of you guys have gone into Painter and seen that you had like Lambert 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on one of your meshes and you're like, I don't know how this happened? Right. So what's probably happened is you've accidentally applied a new material to some faces. And there are times when you want to do this on purpose. This is one of those cases. So we won't be, when it comes to structural meshes, we won't be in Painter. We'll be using Designer in this sense, and we will work a little bit backwards than what you guys are used to. You know, you guys have made your materials first in this case. And now we are going to apply those materials to your meshes. So we're going to be UVing based off of your materials, not the other way around. Whereas before you guys would create your UVs first, bring them into Painter, and do your materials that way. The structural meshes and tiling meshes, a little different. So I do know that I need to do some cleanup with these, which is something that I've never bothered to go over and save. I think those are the only ones. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add in an edge loop here too, because I want to break this up into 3 different materials here. Yeah, so that'll work. So the first things first is I'm going to apply some bricks here. And that was the whole point of me opening up Designer. Do I still have it up? I do. Let me close this. No, I don't really care to save that. So I'm going to export out these bricks real quick. I already have a plaster that I've made, and I'll use those concrete tiles as well. But I like these bricks. The bricks that I used to use, they look good, but there are some areas of obvious repetition, so I don't like to use them quite so much. So I'm going to use these brick walls here. If Designer doesn't pop out on me. Yeah. Wah, wah. Okay. Give me 3 seconds to kick these back out. So again, if you guys need a refresher, when you download Substance Share materials or Substance Source, by default they will be 256 by 256. So increase that size. If you're working fast, you may forget to check these. And if the resolution does not look good on your materials, I'm going to notice. So I'm just going to do a 1024 for these, so I'm okay with that. Actually, I'm going to do a 2048. My other ones are 2048. I kind of want to match that resolution. Again, use your best judgment on what resolution you want. If it's a very, very small piece, do you think you need to waste 2048 by 2048 tiling material on a very, very, very tiny piece that you may only be using once? No. So I know some of you guys have candles in your scene. I wouldn't go any higher than 512. 256 is probably fine. But yeah, I wouldn't go any higher than 512 for those candles. They'll pretty much be the same material, unless you go in and painter and do a material on that. But again, it can be a very small resolution. There's no need to waste all of that resolution. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, export out for those bitmaps, give it its location, desktop, folder, books, it, and didn't change my naming convention. Don't care right now. I'll change it in Unreal so that way you guys can see the difference between both. Okay, so we're done with Designer for now. So when I'm ready to apply my first material, I'm going to select the faces that I want to apply my bricks. And really, when it comes to the UVs, what part do you think matters? The part that the player is going to see, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just assign a new favorite material. So I'm just going to do a Lambert. So Lambert 3. I recommend getting in the habit at this point of naming your materials. Bricks. Color. File. Not there. Desktop. And we'll apply that base color. If you don't see this, and you're like, why can I not see my material? What's happening? Hit the 6 key. So as you can see, there are no UVs done to this yet, right? Look at how pretty they are. This is why I said don't do default UV. They never look good. So again, I only really care about the faces that the player is going to see, but I almost always like to start off with a planar map. So I'm going to just select these front and back. So you guys know that these will give you those options, like this is where you can select your UV texture editor. Did you guys know that that was what that button was? Yes, no? Some of you did? going to be written. Well, there it is. You also have an automatic map button here too, pointer map, etc. Again, just showing you things to save you time. So planar. I know that I want to project from Z, and I'm going to make sure that keep image width height ratio is checked on. I hit apply. And for now, I'm going to just move this out of the way. I might move it back in later, but for now, I'm just going to move it. Now, for the rest of these that I care very little about, I'll probably do the side. It's good to get the sides just in case. So again, I'll come over here to UV, planar, and that will be X, Y, sweet. So I'm going to go ahead and scale that down because I know that absolutely needs to be scaled down. Now, if you want, something else that you can do is you can go ahead and just move and sew these edges together if you're concerned with it. Again, players not really going to see these, but there's always that possibility that they might. So if you really want it to match up perfectly, you can move and sew those edges. I've got a little bit of stretching, so I'll fix that in just a moment. And that. No, there's that. So really, I'm going to just snap these so that way I don't have that stretching. All right, and for these UVs, again, you guys can take the time to UV them. Hopefully they already have some sort of UV done to them. They're not left at default, so you can just group them, and usually I just shrink them down and put them somewhere else because I don't want them to be in my way. So when it comes to this section of it, the main thing that you want to look for is if your material is tiling. Now I'm going to put my pivot, hopefully again all of your pivots are correct. So let me actually put this at the origin. I'm going to turn my grid snapping on. So what I like to do is I like to go ahead and just duplicate one of these on both ends. I'm going to be focused on this one, really, but this is how I'm able to test my tiling. So it looks like it's doing a pretty okay job tiling. I don't really think I need to go back through here and actually mess with this too much, which I got lucky with. You guys probably won't get that lucky on all of your materials. So you may find, you know, if you have like a square material or something like that, because I had keep image width height ratio turned on, it kept that deformation. If I didn't have that, it would have taken up that entire square, and then we would have a lot of stretching. So if it was something like this, you know, again, obviously a lot of stretching. You may also find that you want those bricks to actually be smaller. So if that's the case, then we're going to just start scaling this up to tile more. Now, you need to be careful. Let me go ahead and delete these really quickly because, again, I do this for my own testing purposes. You guys may not want to take the time to do this, but if you want to do environments, I recommend it. I also recommend if you have a second screen, it's much easier to do this on 2 monitors rather than 1. But I digress. Let me go ahead and scale this up. And actually, I want to test something with my scale. I'm going to do a discrete scale. That way hopefully that won't break my tiling. So what I did with the scale is I just multiplied it. Well, I doubled it, essentially, is what I did. Because if I just kind of kept scaling it by eye, there's still a chance that it wasn't going to tile properly. Let's see. Yep, there's some areas here where the seam is. So that's the thing, is you guys want to make sure that you're not able to see a seam. Now, what I recommend doing is Go back. Come on, I'm undoing. It's keeping it like this and tiling it in Unreal instead, because you know your tiling works here at this specific range. Now, really to super know if your tiling is working is to actually line it up with the grid, these edges. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these instead. I know I sewed them earlier, but I'm going to cut them. Super. And I'm actually going to snap these instead to this grid. And the reason why is because I know that this edge of my texture lines up and matches with this edge. So what I'm going to do next is I'll show you guys how to tile in Unreal after we go through the next portion of this. Because again, when I was looking, I still saw a bit of a seam. Doing it this way will ensure that you don't have a seam. If you're still wanting smaller bricks, I will show you guys how to set up your material to tile inside of Unreal instead. So I'm going to go ahead and move and sew this, move and sew this. So it snaps right to the grid. And again, I don't really care about these other ones. Now, if you have a bunch of bricks, brick materials, so we're working with just a small portion of bricks here. You may have some walls that have full bricks. You may have some that are little or smaller. If you find that you only need a small section of bricks, this is when a multi-material is really useful, right? When what you guys are doing in Designer, right? Because then we're not wasting the rest of this 0 to 1 space. Right now, we've got a lot of wasted space here, right? Quite a bit. So, I've got all of this space here that could be used up that isn't being used up. So in this case, for a material or a mesh like this, I would probably make a multi-material instead. So you may be wondering, well, if we're doing this method, why am I making a multi-material blended Designer in the first place? And it's because it helps get rid of that wasted space. Does that make sense to you guys? Cool. It's also a cool process and a neat way to work Designer. So like I said, when we get this into Unreal, I'll show you how to tile this material, this specific material more, which again is also another reason why having your materials on an individual level is useful as well. Okay, so also, I do also want to kind of mention, notice that I'm breaking some UV rules that you guys probably aren't used to seeing being broken. I have flipped normals, or flipped faces. I have faces on top of faces. I have UVs out of the 0 to 1 space. You guys can break all the rules when it comes to tiling textures. There are literally no rules other than, does it look good? Does it tile properly? Those are the 2 rules. And guess who gets to decide that? Well, you and me. Hopefully you have the right idea, but whenever I go to look at it, I'm going to be able to tell if it's tiling, is there a seam? So, like I said, this is the fun part of UVing. You can just break all the rules. Again, when you're using tiling materials, I like to snap to the grid and then scale it in or tile it more inside of Unreal, because I just know that this edge will match with this edge. I don't have to eyeball it. It just makes my life so much easier. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on this process. And we're going to do this piece next. And I know I have another face in here. And so I'm just going to delete that. I've kept it for the longest time. No more. Okay. So I'm going to select this. And with this portion, I'm going to show you guys how you can use textures in kind of an unconventional way. You guys saw earlier when I was using those concrete tiles, right? That's what I'm going to use for this trim piece. So again, I'm going to go through this process again. I'm going to assign a new material. And I'm just going to call this m_concrete tiles. No spaces, can't do that. we'll pretend that didn't happen. All right, so I have this, I believe, in my designer, substance designer. Oh no, I made this easier for myself later. Let's go back to environment art, updated, materials, textures. There we go. So I'm going to grab this. Now something else you guys can do, and in fact I'm going to go through this process here, is I'm going to connect my base color and my normal on here. It's just going to save me a step of having to do it later. Whenever I go to export these out, I'm going to have checked on import textures and materials. You know, before I told you to make sure that that was turned off. It's not the case with this. I'm going to save myself some time from making those materials initially and having to apply those materials. Well, you guys will see. It's going to just save you some time. All right. So again, not really digging this stretched look here. And actually, let me go ahead and, like I said, place my normal map on here too. So, file. Change your use from bump to tangent space normals, because that's what we work with. All right. So anyway, back to these faces here. I'm going to just do a planar map for all of these, and I'll make adjustments where I need to, and then I'll, you know, leave these guys in here. So for this section, I'm going to project in the Z axis. So again, keeping that image width height ratio turned on. Hit apply. Now this is, I wanted to show you guys this one because this is one of those cases where you're like, well, I don't want to snap this to the grid. It looks, you know, crazy, awful. So in this case, I'm actually going to take my UVs and I am going to snap it. Where's my good snap's not working. Or maybe it is. Maybe my tolerance is just low and I'm too far away. Yeah, it's working. Okay. So I'm going to snap it to this end instead, just to kind of scale those up. And from here, this is the fun part. This is where you're like, all right, I know my ends, they snap together. Now I can go through and start just kind of eyeballing it until I think it looks good. And let me fix my scale tool because I don't want a discrete scale on here. And I'm just going to start scaling this up. Maybe. So if you decide that you want to see both ends, again, even though it doesn't make sense to the texture, it might make sense for what you're trying to accomplish here. So if I want to see that grout line here, really the player's not going to see this section, but if I want to see it on both areas, whoa, that normal map on here looks crazy. And I think I want to scale this even more. So again, because I have my grid snap on, I'm going to just move this so that this lines up here. And I'm just going to take another end here. So if you don't want to go through and tile it inside of Unreal, because I want to actually use this for like a 4-piece instead. So again, this is one of those cases where, yes, I'm wasting that 0 to 1 space, but I also know that I'm going to be using these concrete tiles for a much larger piece. So in that case, I wouldn't want to tile it more in Unreal, right? I would want to just tile it in Maya. So this is one of those cases where that's the best way to do it, is I like to just make sure that one of my ends always lines up with that grid point, and then I'll take those UVs and just kind of keep scaling it until I get to the scale that I want. Because again, tiling's super important. So let's see how we did here. And let me soften these edges because I don't want them to be hardened. It's going to look a little funky with my normal map added on here because I have no lighting whatsoever. But again, because I like to just test how everything looks. So we've got our seam there. We've got our nice concrete seam there. So this is one of those cases where, again, I wouldn't want to tile it in Unreal because I know that I want to use it as a floor piece later on. Does that make sense to you guys, kind of the differences so far? And then now I'm just going to add in my plaster material for my final one. So I'm going to select these faces. How are we doing on time? I think we have time to do vertex painting. Okay, so I'm going to, well, we'll see after I've made the materials inside of Unreal. So I'm going to assign another material, and I'm going to name this plaster. Now something else you guys may have noticed is there aren't any lecture slides for this. So hopefully you were taking notes. I will be uploading the lecture video significantly faster provided GoToTraining recorded. It uploads in a much better compression. I didn't use it for the first part of the month because I was having so many issues with it last month, but I'm going to try it out because I want to get these, again, to you guys faster, especially since you don't have lecture slides to go with it. Let's do that stucco. And again, don't care about those other faces. Actually, I'll leave this alone. It's hard to tell if I have it selected or not. There we go. All right. And I believe I still have it the same as in the Z axis, so I'm just going to hit this planer. And truthfully, I'm actually pretty okay with the scale of this. Again, if I want to adjust the scale for it, I'll just do exactly what I did with these concrete tiles and make sure that it snaps to a grid point and go from there. I kind of like being able to see all that damage though. So again, I'm going to test before exporting. I'm going to test this out, see if I'm happy with it. I'm happy with it. Again, don't really care about the top or the bottom or the sides. We'll fix the sides just in case. I never want to just leave the sides alone, just in case we've got it ended. So, going to V, planer, and that'll be in the X, close. And I know that the width is correct. So I kept that image actually. Add these UVs here. And these UVs here. And I'll just snap them down. I love these little snapping buttons. They save me so much time. Noticing it's not on the bottom there. Again, not too concerned with it right now. So, whoa. Nope, we're just going to leave it like that. Nobody's going to be able to notice that sort of section. Sorry, I have my lazy days too. You guys will as well. All right, so when we're ready to export, notice what we have here. What's this? All the history. So we're going to do some cleaning up. So make sure that your naming convention is correct. Notice that I did move it at some point in time. Hopefully you guys will be using the meshes that you've exported into Unreal, so all of this should be fine other than the history. Hopefully you won't be moving anything because the moment you move something, it breaks in Unreal, okay? So I'm going to just delete all by type. And it doesn't break, it snaps. So everything pops in a different location because when you exported it out with the origin point. Does that make sense? So if I move something at negative 187.5. When I bring it into Unreal, it's going to bring it in at what it thinks is 0, 0, 0, but offset it by negative 187. Okay? So make sure that you guys are not moving it if you don't have to. That's why I duplicated some random pieces to test out my tiling. Okay? But can you see how this part of it can be kind of fun? You get to see kind of closer to those end results. It'll make a little bit more sense, even more so, once you get it into your level and you're actually seeing all the materials. The fun part, though, is going to be next week when you start building your lighting, and you're going to be taking a while loading your files, building your lighting, fixing your lighting. Next week's going to be fun. So I'm going to freeze my transforms, and I'm going to export this out. Now, what I recommend to you guys, since you have a whole section of exported FBXs, do not use an old Maya file. Do not use an old Maya scene that you did before you export it out. Don't do that. You could run into some corruption. You may have moved things at one point in time. Use the FBXs that you exported out. Does that make sense? Okay, because you know that they're going to be exactly where you brought them into Unreal. You know that it's going to be going into a completely clean scene in Maya. You're not going back to where you have everything built. I know it's tempting to see how everything looks in Maya first, all together. Don't do it. You will get to see it in Unreal. I promise you. So just keep with a clean scene in Maya. Start with your FBX that you exported out into Unreal. Work that way instead. So again, just to double check, make sure that you have smoothing groups on. Make sure you have triangulate on. Make sure that your FBX file format is 2014, 2015. Again, you guys should already have this set up anyway, but just in case you don't, I want to give you that little reminder. So I'm going to export selection. Just say yes. Let me go ahead and open up Unreal. I don't have an Unreal scene created for this, but you guys will. So you'll open up your Unreal scene and you will import those pieces back in into Unreal. In fact, okay. So let's get Unreal up and running. And so I'll keep rolling with that. Now, something I want to go over with you guys, how many of you are using 4.17 or 4.18? Well, none of you should be using 4.18. How many of you guys are using 4.17? Okay, so have you guys had any issues when you have gone to re-import a mesh where your import dialog box has not shown up? I'm going to show you how to fix that. I'll show you that after I show you this part. So, first. All right, so I'm going to do a new project. I'm just going to work in the default scene for now. Again, you guys won't be doing this. You will be opening up your scene. I don't know that we're going to have time to do vertex painting. Yeah, right. I don't know. Vertex painting is super simple to set up. It would only take me like 20 minutes to show you guys and it not be rushed at all. Once you set it up, you'll be able to just have that set up forever. All right. File, new level. All right. So again, just to show you guys good habits, I'm going to go through the whole process of creating your own named folder again. Oops. Because we want to stay organized and have good housekeeping. Certain materials, static meshes. At this point, guys, if you want to delete out your proxy mesh folder, because I've gone through, I've graded all of week 1, at this point, if you want to save some file space, if you want to delete your proxy mesh folder and all the proxy meshes that are in those, I'm okay with that, all right? Because you shouldn't be using your proxy meshes in your level anyway, right? It should all be your in-game static meshes. So if you want to get rid of your proxy mesh folder with all those proxy meshes, you can get rid of them now, okay? I don't need them anymore. I've already graded that portion. So static meshes, materials, textures. I think that's it. So I'm going to go into my static mesh folder, import. Oh gosh, where did I put that wall? Let me put this on the desktop. Oh, it's there. Okay, never mind. Yep, there it is. All right, so in this case, unless it is a open doorway, like a wall doorway, we're going to auto-generate collision. So if you have your custom collision, this is going to be one of those cases where you want to make sure that you're exporting out your custom collision with those materials, okay? You don't want to lose that. So if you have custom collision, do the same thing where you turn off auto-generate and you turn off one convex hole per UCX. Again, this is for the custom collision only, okay? If the mesh does not have custom collision, keep this on. I just want to reiterate that that is still a thing. Custom collision still exists, all right? I am going to go ahead and turn on import materials and textures. Oh, they've created an invert normal maps button. We don't really need that because of the way we built it in Designer, but back in the day, you used to have to invert your normal map. All right, sorry. I like to reminisce. So this will take a little bit of time. Also, because I haven't restarted my computer in a hot minute. Practices. There we go. All right, so there's those three materials. So again, this is why naming convention is important. You don't want Lambert 1, 2, 3, and so on, right? And you'd be like, what's this? Notice also that my mesh has those materials applied to it already too. Look how pretty it is. And I'm gonna go ahead and just duplicate this so you guys can see some things. You guys are gonna see a seam, it's gonna happen. Don't freak out. We're gonna go over how to fix this later. It's okay. Whoa. That's exciting. I love when issues show up in lecture because if it happens to me, it's gonna happen to you guys. So this is fun. All right. I can see my bricks. Like they're there. I see them. I see like the shadow of them. Do you guys see that? I wonder if it's still. That's so funny. Okay, let's go into that bricks material and see what we've got going on here. Is there? Yep. Just change that. There we go. We fixed it. And yeah, that's weird. So again, don't just assume that you've done everything correctly. It's going to import correctly. Double check these things. That's weird. I wonder what I did in Maya, because that had to be something that I did. Unreal's not just going to automatically do something. I did something in Maya that made it think that it needed to go into the opacity. Let's see. I'm curious now. What did I do? There we go. I have a transparency hookup right here. So it kicked it out with a mask. So if I had broken that connection and then exported, it would have been fine. So see, it was my error. Unreal only does what you tell it to do. It doesn't hate you, I promise. All right, so I still need to do a few things to set up. And also, I'm going to go ahead and just apply this concrete here. Maybe. Still making the concrete tiles. That looks good here. Also, notice that everything came with the nodes, like all the way over here. Please clean up your material trees. Don't leave it at, like, all the way over here. Don't do that. stay organized. So let me put this, because I'm not done with these materials. Notice I only have my normal and my base color attached to this, and there's more to this material than just that. Oh my gosh, I need to close Maya. It does not like, it's not like playing around with this. There we go. All right, so back to this. So see, there's my concrete tiles. You wouldn't know that these were the same material, would you? Now, if this seam is driving you crazy, if you have some working lights in there, you can go ahead and just do a build. Let me make sure this is on preview and not production. Good, okay. I don't want to spend forever building. You can go ahead and build it. This isn't an error that shows up, it's just telling you your lighting needs to be rebuilt. So what do you think that means for you? Rebuild your lighting. Yeah. So give that a moment. And that should get rid of most of that seam. If it doesn't, don't sweat it. We will work on that next week when we go over lighting. It almost looks like I've got Z fighting though. Do I? Yep, I do. Let me fix that. I gotta fix my tolerance. There we go. And because I moved my mesh, I broke the lighting. So, gotta rebuild it. Again, because we haven't worked with light maps or anything like that yet, chances are, guys, you're going to see some crazy looking things when you build your light at first. All right, if you can't stand it, just work in unlit mode. This is also a good way to test if your base colors are too dark, because the moment you start adding lighting, your materials are only going to get darker. As weird as that sounds, you add lights and your materials get darker. But that's because we have it in, you know, we go from unlit, flat, unshaded, or flat shaded lighting to adding in lights. So it's only going to get a little bit darker. So if you're in unlit mode and your materials, as far as the base color goes, looks pretty good, probably are too dark. Just kind of a heads up. But you'll know a little bit better next week. So we've got these here. So again, we're not done with these materials. I'm going to go ahead and we'll start with my bricks. Notice I only have my base color there. So I'm going to select, I need to import my roughness for these as well. So let's see, this will be fun trying to remember where I put everything. Bricks. Do roughness. We don't need a metallic, even though it's sent out a metallic. It's not a metal material. I don't need to bring it in. I can just use a one constant for that, which is just a on and off sort of thing. I won't need my height because I'm not vertex painting this. So we'll just bring that roughness in. And I'll find my roughness for the other portions of this desktop. Let's see here. Roughness, concrete tiles, roughness. So I'll bring those in as well. All right. So I've got my concrete tiles open, so I'm going to hold this, drag it here. Wonder what it brought to you. This is my stucco. Yeah. So I will just connect these, roughness. Now remember earlier I said I wanted to tile my bricks more. I'll show you guys how to do that here in just a moment. 5. And I'll grab my bricks roughness. And my normal for it as well. That's concrete. So I need to import my bricks normal. Import. Yeah, we're going to have to do vertex painting next time. It's a very quick setup. In fact, I believe I have a video for it that I'll go ahead and post for you guys, but I'll go over it again on Saturday. It's a very simple setup, and it's super, super, super cool to do. It's probably one of my favorite post-process things to do. All right, so I do want these bricks to tile more. I'll give it just a moment to catch up. So in order to make this tile more, what I'm going to need is a texture coordinate, texture coordinate. So and it's also, if you're wanting to learn hotkeys, it's the U key. If you need to remember that, just remember UV. That's how I'm going to tile my UVs more. So I'm going to bring this in, and I'm going to pop this into UVs. And I'm going to change this value. I'm just going to start off with just doubling it. Give it a moment to catch up. There we go. So it has tiled my bricks more. So let's just see how that looks. So remember, the scale on the bricks for my wall felt a little large to me. I'm going to be paying very close attention to your guys' scale on how you scaled your UVs and how well it matches your roughnesses, your reference as well. Now, if you go with a different material reference for your scene, let's say you've got a wallpaper wall that you wanted to do some sort of tiles or neat looking tiles instead, please include that in and let me know that you wanted to change some things, okay? I'm happier with that scale, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna go with that scale. So I showed you guys how you can tile more in Maya by scaling up your UVs out of the 0 to 1 space. And now I've also shown you guys another way that you can also tile in Unreal by using this texture coordinate node, okay? Does anything about this process not make sense? Do you need me to go over anything else before I let you guys go? No? Okay. Like I said, this is the fun part. Have fun with it. You can break all the UV rules. You get to see how your room will look with materials on it. And then the really fun, challenging part is going to be lighting it and making it, you know, well, more believable, right? So have fun with this portion of it, please.